Hi, Don Klassen here again. In this video I'd like to elaborate more on the theme of how Putin invaded Ukraine, partly to put Donald Trump back into power in Washington. Putin saw that Trump came very close to overthrowing the government on January the 6th, 2021. And he knows about all the divisions here in this country. He's very happy to stoke them. He also was noticing that Donald Trump was in a lot of trouble with the law, increasingly on many levels, many fronts, and he could be arrested or indicted any time. And the effect of this war at this time was to certainly push all that off the front page. And he didn't expect, though, of course, the valiant resistance of the Ukrainian people, so it slowed down his efforts. But the idea that he may have intended this, I'm sure it's crossed the mind of Joe Biden and all of official Washington and journalists and all kinds of people, but they're not able to say so or out loud in public, because if they're wrong and Putin never intended this, it's just another gratuitous insult to him, at a time when he's really unstable, it seems like, and very angry. And if it is true, it would cause a firestorm of controversy here domestically in the United States, because the right wing has been swearing up and down that he has nothing to do with Russia, that he's not an agent of Russia. And yet it's very obvious, as I point out in that article, that he's been doing everything in his power to undermine Ukraine and to enhance the power of Russia during those 4 years, and reluctantly went along with certain things because certain people advised him or because circumstances forced him to it. So the two of them are like soul brothers otherwise. They have the same kind of modus operandi in how they operate politically. And Trump is a great admirer of Putin. I'll go into a quote here later from Michael Cohen about that. But Vladimir Putin, you have to understand this guy's mentality. He was a KGB officer in East Berlin, I believe, during the Cold War. And anybody with any sense at all could look at East Berlin versus West Berlin in those days and tell which is the morally superior system. The freedom of the West and its democratic model, or this dark autocratic system in Russia where people are willing to risk their lives trying to get out of there by the point of machine guns crossing that wall. And he knew all this stuff, but he didn't care as long as he was on top of that miserable system. And when it fell, he said it was the greatest disaster of the 20th century. Which is funny, because it's curious at least, because to most of the rest of the world it was one of the greatest victories for mankind we'd ever seen. And now he elaborated later that he said what he meant by that, he claims, is that it made the United States a unipolar power, a superpower, with no one to stop them. And he's partially right. We could have helped Russia get on its feet as a young democracy during the 1990s, but most of the people from the West just went over there to help loot the country by buying up public property, dime on a dollar, a penny on a dollar. And that's what made these oligarchs. They're inside connections, that sort of thing. And Putin, well, he was appointed the chairman of the board of this committee in St. Petersburg, where all foreign investors had to go through him in order to get any business done in Russia. And so he became very corrupt. He learned all about the power in that, and he eventually ascended to the throne, so to speak, of Russia, and has been trying to rebuild the country into this idea of greatness. This is what I want to get into too, is his idea of what constitutes his vision. So he sees definitely that he has said that he sees democracy as a system that has outlived its usefulness, and as a as obsolete, a thing of the past. And this idea of progress is actually a return to almost a medieval world where every nation is run in an autocratic style. It might be a dictator like him, it might be a king, it might be left-wing, right-wing extremists. It doesn't matter. As long as it's not democracy, that's an improvement to him. And there's all these right-wing fanboys around the world that look up to him as their poster child, their inspiration, and including all of Trump's base. Well, not all, but most people have been trained to think that Russia is actually the victim in this situation, that the United States has done all these things to crowd them out. And it is true that we have done some things that we were overstretched or an overreach, ethically in other ways. But by and large, we have a much superior system because it's an open democratic model. At least to some degree, it's still left. It's in really weakened state because of all this grievance culture that Fox News and all these sources have developed in the country. A democracy, in my article, I think it's martial law in the 2020 election. You can look it up. I'll have it linked below. I go into why democracy is such a superior system to something that Christians have seemed to have forgotten, and other people too. They want a strong leader. That's all they care about. They're tired of all the compromise as they see it. Well, democracy is built on compromise. Nobody gets everything they want, and everybody gets enough to live with. And the idea of the two-party system is that they're like two sides of your brain. The one is more logical and hard-nosed and that sort of thing. That's the conservative side, and the other is more intuitive and creative and more grace-oriented rather than law. And the conservatives are more frugal and cautious and prudent, supposedly, at least in theory. That sort of thing. They're supporters of tradition and not reinventing the wheel and all that stuff. All things that I support. And the other side is more like, let's try something different. Let's do things in a more collective way. It's perfectly legitimate because every society, you got to balance out the rights of society and the rights of the individual. You got to balance out the idea of the government supporting the welfare of the people, not just the oligarchs or a handful of people who just rob our treasury left and right in every way imaginable, and the Republican Party is their party. Here's a very small example. They're the ones that passed legislation that allowed anonymous shell companies to buy a property in the United States without disclosing who the real owners are. And that's how mob money gets into this country. And that was Trump's business model. He would launder money for the Russian mob because he was in so much financial trouble constantly. That's how he built his towers. So, and this is all admitted by his sons and many other witnesses to the way he does business. And what he wants to do is bring Putin's mafia culture to America. And that's why for the 4 years he was in there, I was very alarmed by all that was going on. The church people felt relaxed that, a conservative is in charge. Well, in the American context, a conservative party is a party that's trying to conserve the American Revolution, not trying to reverse it by being the new Tory party or the new oligarchical party or the new monarchical party or the new dear leader party. It's supposed to conserve the democratic model that Abraham Lincoln referenced in his Gettysburg Address about that government of the people, by the people, and for the people would not perish from off the face of the earth. And so this has all been torn up and thrown out the window in recent years as Christians got involved with right-wing politics exclusively, being told that the secularists, the liberals, are all your enemies. They're not your enemies. They're the fish you're supposed to win over by your exemplary lives being pillars of society, being reasonable, moderate people everybody can look up to. But we've been pushed more and more into extremism in this effort to divide and conquer. And so this is where we're at. And Putin knows all about this. And he actually, this is an amazing background he has, because he actually has a political Svengali-like strategist named, he has this incredible name here. Let me see if I can get it. Yeah, it's Vladislav Yurovich Surkov, a young guy, actually. And Surkov has a background in theater, if you can believe that. Because he's developed, it makes sense because he's developed a system of government there that is a form of political theater. The engineer, the Economist described him as the engineer of a system of make-believe, a land of imitation political parties, stage-managed media, and fake social movements. This is a far worse situation than it was under the old Soviet days. Here's another quote from the London Review of Books writer. Quote, in contemporary Russia, unlike the old USSR or present-day North Korea, where you just had, propaganda and that sort of thing and lies, and now in the new Russia, the stage is constantly changing. The country is a dictatorship in the morning, a democracy at lunch, an oligarchy by supper time. While backstage, oil companies are expropriated, journalists are killed, and billions are siphoned away. Surkov is at the center of the show, sponsoring nationalist skinheads one moment, backing human rights groups the next. It's a strategy of power based on keeping any opposition there may be, constantly confused, a ceaseless shape-shifting that is unstoppable because it's so indefinable. It's a strategy of keeping everybody off balance because they start doubting their own memories of what they've heard Putin or someone say. Now, Trump had the exact same strategy. In fact, toward the end of his administration, Jared Kushner admitted to the press one day, very arrogantly, that the philosophy of the administration was controversy elevates message, meaning we go out there and we lie up a storm every day knowing that the so-called fake media will do their job, which is to fact-check their government, your government, to keep the public from being deluded or going insane. And so they have to cover the crazy things that he would say in order to debunk them. And he told about 30,000 lies or so, according to, I think, this newspaper up in Canada during his time, 30,000 documented lies, because this is part of his strategy too, where he's all over the map. You don't know what he stands for. Whatever comes into his mind, that's what he'll say. And people get so confused and worn down by it that they just kind of give up. And one of the clues of the Antichrist is that he will wear out the saints. Well, at any rate, Trump is his guy, no doubt. And here's a quote from Michael Cohen. Now, Michael was his personal lawyer and his fixer, his kneecapper sorts. And Michael writes in his book, Disloyal, quote, I knew him better than even his family did because I bore witness to the real man in the strip clubs, in shady business meetings, and in the unguarded moments when he revealed who he really was, a cheat, a liar, a fraud, a bully, a racist, a predator, a con man. He, I think it's a Los Angeles reviewer of the book, went on to say, quote, Trump's model of a man in power, according to Cohen, is Vladimir Putin. And Trump is described as enamored of Putin's wealth and unilateral influence, and awestruck by what he sees as the Russian president's ability to control everything from the country's press to its financial institutions. Locking up your political enemies, criminalizing dissent, terrifying or bankrupting the free press through libel lawsuits, Trump's all-encompassing vision wasn't evident to me before he began to run for president, Cohen wrote, unquote. This is just amazing to me that the 4 years that he was president, I just could not, I was in constant shame every day that my people, the evangelicals, who for decades had yammered on about the need for men and women of integrity and character in government, and that we're the real experts in character, and that we have to stop defining deviancy down and all these things, elect this guy because he's got an R after his name. And they couldn't imagine electing Hillary because of abortion. You know, in American politics, you get one of two choices, basically. It's a very broad, it's not a parliamentary system where you can choose a party that's more narrowly specific to your particular interests. You have to choose. And the Founding Fathers were very concerned about the character of the candidates running, even more so than parties. That some of them didn't even want to have parties because of this reason. They wanted people to focus upon the character of the person and what their philosophy of government is. And what it really is, not this shape-shifting kind of a illusional world that is being built in our time, this strong delusion that's covering the earth now, that has fooled so many people because they've been trained to just throw their brains out the window and just do as they're told. They have rings run around their brains by the Jay Sekulows of the world and other apologists who just, they act so with such faux outrage over things that, you know, are just molehills. And people say, gee, I must not be getting this. There must be something important here because he's really exercised about it. And that they just constantly just bombard you with what you ought to think. I mean, kind of Limbaugh style in that way. He always would say, you know, just go enjoy the weekend. I'll come back on Monday. I'll tell you what you ought to think about politics that happened over the weekend. This is not a healthy democracy by any means at all. I know I was a ditto head in the 1990s because I thought he was entertaining and I thought he had something, but I found out eventually that he was an ad hominem attacker and a scoffer, and very hypocritical, and he was paid $60,000 an hour on the radio to do all that, an hour. Well, at any rate, so Putin really wants, he has this vision that progress means the world turned back to the Middle Ages, if you will, where vast hierarchies of power above the peasants, you know, rule the world. And unfortunately, because of the Republican policies of the last 40 years, that's pretty much what's happened to this country. All the oligarchs of this country have gotten every law imaginable passed on their behalf for their benefit to make them richer and richer and richer while the middle class disappears. And that's what drives all the anger of so many Americans, but they don't understand why it's happened. And so this is all politics. It's political events. When you study the current events that are supposed to jibe with the prophecies, you can't help avoid thinking about politics, you know. And this is pretty much my take on the situation about politics. At any rate, this is a very dangerous situation, and this is ripe for an overthrow, because what the right wing is saying now is that Biden is weak. They will jump onto anything they can to attack him. And so if he doesn't fall for these constant provocations by Putin now to, I dare you to get involved in the fight for Ukraine and get involved, they're going to demagogue it as him being weak. They're going to create chaos in the country. They've had trucker convoys, they've got militias, they've got all these different people that are ready to resort to violence to take back power and destroy the whole democratic process. And that's where we're at. And if Trump gets in there, I think the first thing he will do is stab Putin in the back by launching a huge nuclear attack upon Russia or anybody he wants, opening up the first seal of Revelation in Revelation 6:2, which kills a fourth of the world's population. I don't think Putin would do it. I think he's just bluffing. But Trump would, because he's crazy enough. He's that impulsive enough, because it's all about his ego and about him being tough. Or just circumstances will something happens or goes wrong, or this is a very volatile situation. I'm just trying to alert you, because like I said in the last video, this tribulation, when it starts, will start somewhere around a Passover. That's only about a month away as I speak. So we need to be kind of on the alert and watching these situations to see how it evolves, if at all. But I'm hoping and praying for a ceasefire so that this will be ratcheted down. Any rate, there's so much we could say. There's so many different rabbit trails you can go off in, and I'm just doing this by the fly. I don't have time to write out scripts and to get a teleprompter and all these sorts of things. This is an emergency situation of sorts, and I'm sorry for the unprofessionalism. And I don't even know how to edit videos and all that sort of thing. But I just want to get as much out there as I can. So thank you for listening, and I'll have